We're going to move on to understanding the need for copyright legislation. We're going to look at how the software industry in particular uses different types of licensing and how they use that to protect their copyright and reduce both copyright theft, instances of plagiarism, and modification of software. We're also going to be looking at how do you justify which license to use in a given situation. Copyright law, it's a legislation that a government invokes to protect the rights of genuine creators of original works. And that could be software, books, music, you name it. However, there are a lot of key terms that we're going to be looking at in this particular part of the course. So do pause the video and jot these down. You need to know about piracy, which is the practice of using or making illegal copies of software. And to protect against piracy, software organizations use things like product keys, digital rights management, and both of these methods are used to control the access to copyrighted material. Now, you also need to know about Free Software Foundation and Open Source Initiative, and these organizations promote the use of free software, so that can be used by people all around the world. And then there is Freeware and Shareware, back from my GCSE. You'll probably know a lot about this already. So hopefully you got these down. Now we're going to look at software copyright first. And software, just like everything else, is protected by copyright laws in the same way as music CDs, videos, articles, magazines, books, art, all of that. When you purchase a piece of software, there are rules that must be obeyed. And those rules include that it's illegal to make a copy of the software to sell or give it away. But can you think of a reason why you want to make a copy and you still might be okay? We'll come back to that one later. Now, software cannot be used on a network, or it can't be used on multiple computers unless you have a multiple use license. You can't take one game and install it on 10 computers. That's illegal. It's also illegal to use coding from copyrighted software in your own software. So you can't just take some code and pass it on as your own software or sell it. You will need the permission of the copyright holder. It's also illegal to rent out software packages without permission to do so. So think about all those internet cafes where people play games, the gaming cafes. They might not be doing things right unless they have permission from the original copyright holder. Now, it's also illegal to use the name of a copyrighted software on other software without agreement to do so. For example, you created a football game and you call it FIFA 22 and you start selling it. That's breaking copyright as well. So a lot of things are there which can break copyright, not just simply making copies and selling those copies. Now, software piracy is huge and it's a major issue for software companies all around the world. And most of them try to protect their copyrighted work because it leads to financial loss and businesses can close down. Now, when software is being installed, you might have to enter a unique product key, and that's normally in the box, kind of like a little serial number that's used to activate the software. Sometimes you might need to click a button or a box which states that you agree with the license agreement before the software continues to install. At other times, there might be a hologram or a sticker which comes on the original software which tells you that this is a genuine copy and not an illegal copy. Sometimes they will only run if you have the CD-ROM or the DVD-ROM, especially in the case of game consoles, if you've got a disk in the drive, or you might have a USB dongle that needs to be plugged in to activate the software. And that's an example of the use of hardware to protect software. So a number of methods are being used to stop piracy. Now, there are organizations like the Federation Against Software Theft in the UK, which have been set up to protect the industry against piracy. And these companies end up prosecuting organizations or individuals who break the law or break copyright. I'm sure similar organizations are set up in your country as well. And if you wanted to read the extract that's on screen, that kind of highlights you on how effective these organizations are and how far their reach is. So do pause the video and have a look at that newspaper article where eBay traders in the USA were fined a huge amount of money for selling illegal copies of Norton security software, of all things. A quick Google search will give you countless examples of how people are prosecuted for breaking copyright, and obviously things like eBay sellers for streaming devices, even Justin Bieber, who had to settle with a photographer because the photographer took a picture of him and then Justin Bieber used that picture to promote his Instagram account. So the original photographer sued Justin Bieber, and in the end, they both settled. So a huge variety of copyright theft or copyright law breaches can be prosecuted. And the most striking one these days is music publishers who are calling for TikTok to be probed because they use extracts of songs in their little clips. TikTok videos are like 10, 15, 20 seconds long, and they use copyrighted music, which kind of falls under the safety rule because you can use small extract for critical work or parody or things like that. And music publishers are now saying that, well, TikTok is making a huge amount of money from their platform, but the music producers don't get a share of that, even though 10, 15 seconds of their particular songs are being used millions and millions of times every day. So there's a congressional probe in the United States that's looking into the situation. And you, as a computer scientist, need to start thinking about these type of issues. Is it ethical for TikTok to use those small extracts because they are within the law? You are allowed to use small extract 10 to 15 seconds. Is it ethical for the music producers to demand money for that when they don't demand money from everyday users? For example, I can use a small extract for parody or teaching and I can get away with it, but TikTok apparently can't. So all of those issues need to be thought about. And who knows who's right and who's wrong, but at some point there needs to be a consensus, and that's where eventually code of ethics and code of conduct and the law comes into play. Now, another way that the software industry tries to control their copyright is through the use of digital rights management. And this has been originally set up to control what devices a CD could play on. For example, preventing a CD from playing on a computer, because on computers you had something like CD burners, which could burn more copies, whereas if you had CD players, they could just only play. And all of those years ago, we're now going back 30 plus years, digital rights management came into the picture. Certain CDs would not just work on computers at all, but they would work on CD players. Now, DRM has since been updated to cover more areas, and it does this by using protection software to help stop the copying, for example, video files, music files, or even ebooks. Now, DRM has gone even further because you can look at server-based technology and you've got to constantly connect with the server to authorize connection. So if there's a break in the server connection, then your copy of the software stops working. And DRM creates restrictions that control what the users can do with the data. For example, a music file streamed over the internet works, but is not allowed to be downloaded or copied. An ebook can be read on a tablet, but you can't download it and use it offline. Or a game that just only works when you're connected to a server, and the moment that connection breaks, you can't play the game. The original aim of DRM is to ensure that any attempt made to break the copyright protection produces a defective copy which does not work. But it now leads to inconveniencing the user who might have paid for the software and just simply wants to use it under all conditions. So there is a need for convenience versus copyright protection and theft. And again, These are one of the things you might need to think of when you create original software for sale in future. Now, you're not the only one that will need to think about it, because quite a lot of big companies regularly think about it. So when you buy a product which is normally protected by DRM, it normally comes with a key which licenses a single use on a device. Now, we've already talked about online server-based DRM, and there's countless examples of that. Apple Music uses DRM, and it layers in stream music to prevent the user downloading all the music in the first month of the subscription. Because what would happen is that you pay whatever the cost is for a month, you download everything, and then you cancel the subscription and still use their music. So DRM is used to prevent that. Netflix uses it. Spotify uses similar techniques. So as long as you keep paying for the subscription, your content works. The moment you stop paying for it, it stops. The most drastic use of something like copy protection or DRM was a game called Earthbound, where the publishers just allow you to play the game, and you spend 40 hours playing the game until you reach the final boss. And what happens is, the moment you reach the final boss, all your data is deleted and you can't play the game anymore. That was the most severe example of DRM and copyright protection use. The best way to learn about DRM is perhaps to look at how different organizations use DRM to protect their particular copyright. On screen, you will see a list of companies: PS Now, Xbox Cloud, Netflix, Spotify, Apple TV, Apple Music, Steam, Disney, and I'm sure there are a lot more companies out there that are using DRM to protect their content. So your task is to investigate the use of DRM to protect copyright. And you might start by looking at some of these companies, or maybe one of these companies that perhaps interests you. I've listed a few points which should start guiding your search for that particular company. So if you were interested in Netflix, you might want to look at how encryption, or EME, which is encrypted media extension in HTML5, is used by Netflix to protect its video content. Or perhaps you might want to look at how Xbox Cloud uses perhaps a blockchain system. So pick one or many, it's entirely up to you, and then start doing some research and perhaps report back on what you found out. You might want to investigate an entirely new company and gather information based on these type of prompts and report back. Now, commercial software is software that we pay for. It's available to customers for a fee, and you end up with a license for perhaps one genuine copy if you buy a single user license, or a multi-use license can be purchased so you can install it for multiple users. Now, occasionally, software can also be offered free of charge. For example, if an earlier version is bought, you get the update for free. And this type of software is fully copyright protected, and none of the code can be used without prior consent of the owner. So commercial software is copyright protected, you have to pay for it, and perhaps you might end up getting free updates. This is the most common way of buying and selling software. Now, some people can't afford software, or the cost of commercial software can be very, very high because it takes years upon years for the company to develop something. Free software and the open source initiative are non-profit organizations that promote the benefits of giving users the freedom to run, copy, change, and adapt software. And examples of such software that they promote include FSpot, which is a photographic manager, Scribus, LibreOffice, OpenOffice, all of that's part of these non-profit organizations' initiatives. Now, the users who use this type of software are allowed certain freedom. They can run the software for any legal purpose they wish. If it's an illegal purpose, obviously, then they don't have permission. They can study the program source code and modify it where necessary to meet their needs. So that allows new updates to be generated. They can redistribute copies of the software to friends and family, and the modified code can also be distributed to everyone. This allows regular updates, and an individual might just create a program but then there might be others that take the program forward. Now, users do not need to seek permission to do any of the above, since the software is not protected by any copyright restrictions. However, there are going to be some rules that the user must adhere to, and that means that users cannot add source code from other pieces of software unless that software is also described as free software or open source software. They can't use source code to produce software which copies existing software, which is subject to copyright laws. So you can't take a generic football game and then reskin it or apply new textures and create a model of FIFA, for example, and start selling it. They can't adapt the source code in such a way that it infringes copyright laws protecting other software, so using to crack other software perhaps. And they cannot use the source code to produce software which is deemed offensive to anyone. You will need to understand the basic philosophies of both these organizations, and the Free Software Foundation generally focuses on perhaps what the recipient of the software is permitted to do with the software, whereas the Open Source Initiative focuses on the practical consequences offered by the four freedoms. The aims for Open Source Initiative is to provide effective collaboration on software development between users. Now, there are 10 principles that have been developed to ensure the philosophy of the Open Source Initiative. They're all on screen, and most of them will make sense to you. Do you need to remember all of them? No, you don't. You've just got to be aware that these two organizations are focusing on ensuring that software is developed collaboratively and is free for people to use. Okay? And at the same time, it adheres to copyright laws as well. So they don't advocate the breaking of copyright, but they wanted to ensure that software is freely available and runs on any particular platform ethically. Another type of software out there is freeware. And freeware is software a user can download from the internet free of charge. Once it's been downloaded, there are no fees associated by using the software. And there are tons of software out there like Adobe Reader, Skype, and a lot of media players like VLC. Now, unlike free software, freeware is subject to copyright laws. Now, free software is entirely free. That means you can do whatever you want with it, you can distribute it, you can modify the source code, all of that. Freeware, you're allowed to use it for free, but the copyright still belongs to the original copyright holder. And users are often requested to tick a box to say they understand and they agree to the terms and conditions governing the software itself. The user is not allowed to study or modify the source code in any way whatsoever. The final type is shareware. Now, shareware allows users to try out some software free of charge for a trial period. So think of this as perhaps something like a game that you can use it for 7 days for a trial period, and after that you either stop using it or you pay for it. Another version of shareware type approach could be apps which are given to you for free but with limited functionality, and you pay a premium or a full price to unlock all the features. Now, at the end of this trial period, the author of the software will request that you pay a fee if you want to continue using it. And once this fee is paid, the user ends up with full functionality and free updates and help and all of those other mods and cons that are part of commercial software. This type of software is also protected by copyright laws, and users cannot modify or use the source code in any of their own software without permission. Now, shareware has become one of the most popular ways of distributing software, giving people a chance to use it before they pay for it. On screen, you're going to see a few example questions. So do pause the video and have a go at answering them. You should be able to name 3 types of software licensing. You should be able to describe 3 features which identify the differences between them for each type of software. You should also be able to describe how copyright issues affect each type of named software licensing. So do pause the video and have a go at these questions and share them with me. Now, in this particular question that you see on screen, you're going to go through the IEEE Code of Ethics there are some principles listed, and you will see some incidents on the next part of the question. You will need to drag and connect different incidents with the engineering code of ethics and whether they're ethical behavior or whether they're unethical behavior. So do read this question, pause the video, make sure you're familiar with this, and then look at the incidents and consider whether they're ethical behavior or unethical behavior. Now, for each incident that you've described as ethical behavior, indicate which category the incident maps to. So just basically, you've got to make links between incident A, B, C, D, E, and F, and whether they're ethical or unethical behavior. So that's the first stage. And then link those incidents to the key principles, especially the ethical behaviors one. You don't need to link the unethical behavior ones. That's all for today's session. Hopefully, you know the different types of software licensing and you can apply them to different scenarios. You know about the need for copyright legislation, and you can also look at engineering code of conducts and apply them to a particular situation. I'll catch up with you in the next session.